Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
Maloa lele, ko Dean, ko hoku aho whaeni I Tonga. I am Dean, and this is my 4th day in Tonga. Man, it feels kind of nice being able to speak in English again, because over the past 4 days, I've been out here in Tonga and just been immersing myself in the language. And when I'm talking about immersing myself, I'm talking about I literally don't speak any lick of English. So I do speak English, but only for words I don't know, and I've been almost exclusively spending my time on learning Tongan. So even in my thoughts, if I'm waiting in the car and I'm driving somewhere, I'm trying to think in Tongan and translate and test all these different things. So it's super nice now, being able to talk in English, because it's tough not being able to formulate my thoughts. Especially when I'm having conversations, it's tough to really ask deep questions and get to the bottom of things and have good conversations, because I don't know how to speak. I mean, I barely know a couple words in it. So happy to report that over the past 4 days alone, I mean, I've gone from completely rookie beginner level to legit. I can hold my own on a good conversation. So I think now I'm pretty proficient, I would say. But I'm in Tonga right now, trying to learn language, the culture, the values, all the things like that. But for this podcast episode, let's start with the story, as always. For this story, a couple weeks ago, actually, I think it was last week or the week before, it was Thanksgiving. So I want to say 2 weeks ago, I was in Salt Lake with the family. Everyone's in Utah. And I watched Wicked. So I actually saw it twice. I saw it before I went out to Utah, and then in Utah, I saw it with the fam. So being able to watch a movie twice, I think it goes with any type of form of media, whether that be a movie, a book, an article, whatever it is. But reading it over and over again, being able to see it multiple different times, I think you're always learning new things. You're always picking up on different things, because first of all, you know how the story goes. When I was watching Wicked, I knew how the story went. And so I was able to pick up on different things, and I was like, oh, they use that later in the film for foreshadowing and things like that. But the other thing that I think is even more important, and why I love reading, especially books, over and over again, is because I change as a person. So I'm able to pick up on different things and focus in on different things that I wouldn't have noticed before, simply because now I'm in a different time in my life, and I can pay attention, and I notice these certain things more than I did before. So that's one thing that I like about rereading stuff and rewatching stuff. But with Wicked, there were 2 scenes specifically that really, really stood out to me. And they both have to do with something I'm calling unwanted sympathy. And I'll tell the stories. Oh my goodness, I just saw a dog. I'm walking right now in Tonga at night. It's 10:40. And bro, I'm actually so scared of these dogs. Because these dogs, bro, the thing about these dogs, I was walking one time and they were literally chasing me, barking their heads off, about to bite. So I just learned that there's street dogs and then there's owner dogs. So the street dogs won't bite. The owner dogs, they will bite and they will bark, and then we get so angry. And I just saw an owner dog, so I'm gonna walk away from that dog. Anyways, quick side note, but back to the story. I want to talk about something called unwanted sympathy, and I'll tell the story. I'm not sure if you heard that. You probably definitely heard these dogs barking, but bro, there's literally a dog right there. That's so scary. But I just walked back to the house because of how afraid I was of these dogs. Bro, they're barking and everything. Bro, the reason I had a fear of dogs as a kid and even into high school was because of these dogs out here, bro. They're so scary. You just walk past them and they start barking at you. Look at that. They're dog. Man, I wish I could record this. But anyways, back to the story I'm trying to tell. They're actually so scary. Back to the story I'm trying to tell. Yeah, so you have Elphaba, and then, oh man, what was it? I was talking about Wicked. Okay, bro, I gotta get my head back in the game. Got it. There's a movie called Wicked, and I went to watch it twice, and there's 2 stories that stood out to me, and it all pertain to something I'm calling unwanted sympathy. I'm not sure if this is already a term, but it's a term that I came up for, because I think it fits with what I'm trying to explain. But in the story, there's 2 main characters. One, her name is Elphaba, and the other, her name is Galinda. And as a bit of backstory on this musical Wicked is a prequel to The Wizard of Oz. So if you watch The Wizard of Oz, you got Dorothy. I mean, I think everyone knows the story. Dorothy goes on the yellow brick road. I think she kills the Wicked Witch. And then on the way, she follows the yellow brick road and brings on friends along the way. But this is the movie that comes before that. And so it follows the journey of the two witches that we see, or one is the good witch, the one is the evil witch, the wicked witch and the good witch, which is Galinda. So there's Galinda and Elphaba, and they're both growing up. Elphaba is born green, so she's green, and this is like a normal world. So everyone else, they're like a normal skin color. So like, I don't know, black, brown, white, whatever you want to be, but they're normal skin colors. Essentially, they're not green. Near the beginning of this movie, Elphaba goes to high school. And high school is initially with her little sister. So, quick backstory. There's Elphaba, who's green, and Elphaba has a younger sister. Her name is Nessa Rose. And Nessa, we'll call her, Nessa is handicapped. She's in a wheelchair. And so Nessa is going off to high school, but her father doesn't like Elphaba for a couple of reasons. The main one being that she's like green and in some ways indirectly the cause of her mother's death, or at least the father blames Elphaba for the death of his wife. Okay, let's take it from the top. It's your boy again. We're back with the pod. So much just happened behind the scenes, but all I'm going to say is I remember why I was so afraid of dogs when I was a kid living in Tongan. But back to the story. We got Elphaba and we got Galinda. Elphaba meets Galinda for the first time. And Galinda, being the popular girl trying to stand out and trying to get everyone's favor, she goes up to the new girl, Elphaba, and she's like, hey, how can I help you? Of course, it's not out of the goodness of anything that she has. Like, it's not out of the goodness of her heart, but just because she wants to stand out in front of all the other kids. And there's something specifically that she said that really, really stood out to me. But it was when she said, I can help you fix your problem. And then Elphaba, she kind of takes a step back. She repeats like problem. And she, of course, is referring to her skin. And what's really striking to me about the facial expressions, about the entire scene, was especially how everyone pointed at Elphaba. Everyone looked at her and everyone said she has a problem. Everyone felt bad for her. But when Elphaba heard this, he took a step back. He's like, problem? What is this problem they're talking about? And of course, this is green skin. And so it's this sympathy that they're all giving her. They all feel bad for her, but she doesn't want it. She doesn't want others to feel bad for her. She doesn't want others to like lend this helping hand as if she's somehow less than, simply because of the color of her skin. And I think there's a really, really powerful lesson to be had there, especially for me, because growing up Tongan, growing up Polynesian, that's what you hear a lot. You hear a lot of, oh, let me lend a helping hand to this kid, to this brown kid, to this Tongan kid, to this Polynesian kid. And of course, I always appreciate help, of course. But I think the point where it gets to a problem is when someone looks at that and they're like, okay, that person is going through problems and I'm going to feel bad on their behalf. And I think I actually see this a lot at Northwestern with all these woke kids walking around. They're like, oh, I'm going to defend and be angry and offended on behalf of other people. Especially with like, it's so interesting. These woke kids who are pointing at me being brown or pointing at some other black dude and saying like, oh, your life must be so hard because you're black. Let us go and protest on your behalf. When in reality, they don't want that. I don't want that. Like, bro, what are you doing? And so I think that is a story that really hit home for me with this idea of unwanted sympathy. And the other part of this story, at the same scene actually, is with Nessa Rose, the Elphaba sister who's handicapped. And it's the very same thing where someone comes behind her and she's in a wheelchair and they try to push her wheelchair. Like, oh, let me help you. But both Elphaba and Nessa Rose like, she doesn't need your help. I don't need your help. And I think that's another example where there's a sympathy that they want to give. And maybe it's not even from a bad place. Maybe it is from an honest place of trying to help out. But the thing is that the sympathy is unwanted. The person who's receiving it, Elphaba or Nessa Rose or me, there are some cases where we don't want it. And the reason we don't want it is because everyone looks at it as like, oh, it's some tough thing. And maybe it is. But I think when this happens to me, or the reason I don't like it is because it's putting moral judgment, moral values on something that's like objectively true. Like here's a perfect example of that. If someone, even for me, like right now, if someone were to call me fat, I'd be like, okay, sure. Like by the medical definition, I am fat. And I think when other people hear this as well, like, oh, when they're obese, like, yes, you are obese. Just accept the fact that you are over a certain body fat percentage, dude. Like, come on. But the next step is when they place these moral judgments on saying, because I'm fat, because I am obese, that somehow makes it me bad. That somehow makes me a bad person. And I think that's where the issue lies, where because of the objective fact that Elphaba has this green skin, and the objective fact that Nessa Rose is in a wheelchair, that somehow makes them bad people, or that somehow is worse. But I like to think of it as it doesn't make it worse, it's just this other thing that I get to go through that no one else gets to. Like Nessa Rose, for example, who else is able to be in a wheelchair and say to themselves, okay, even though I'm in a wheelchair, look at what I can do. And actually, it's because I'm in this wheelchair that I've gone through struggles, I've gone through trials that no one else has gone through, and I will be able to get through that. And it's the same thing for Elphaba. Like, because I have this green skin and I have to face all of this struggle, all of this hardship, that has made me the person I am today. And that's what I think I stand with myself too, where it's not because like someone feels bad for me that I've gone through this upbringing of like separated parents and all these things, but because I went through that, I was able to build the character that I have right now, the character that I have today, that I'm able to go and do these things that I want to go. So that was the story that I had. Hope it resonated. But moving on to the weekly update. Honestly, I completely forgot the weekly update from last episode because it's been like, I think, solid 2 weeks at least. But it'll probably relate to something about family time. I think I probably, if it was related to family time, it was probably fine because I had spent a lot of time with family over the past 2 weeks ever since I left school. I'm spending Thanksgiving and then now I'm here in Tonga. But yeah, family time is doing well. But going on to the philosophizing section where I talk about different things that I've thought about throughout the week or since the last episode. Well, there's a couple of things for this one. I'll try to go relatively quickly, but probably not. First, we got the complexity curve. And I think I saw this first from, I think it was like an email meme. So Alex Hormozy sends out these emails now, and in the PS of these emails, he contains like memes. And I first saw it as a meme from him. But basically, it's like a bell curve, like the normal distribution curve. But on the left side is like super dumb people, like when they're first starting out, like very simple. And on the right side, it has like the people who have mastered it, and on the middle are like people who overcomplicate everything. And so it goes on this curve. So you start out at what I call uninformed simplicity, where all you do is you start with the basics. Like I'll use in this case I'll use dieting or like getting in shape. I think that's a good example. So I think when you first start off, it's like uninformed simplicity. You just start with the basics. The basics would just be focus on sleep, focus on what you eat, and focus on exercising, and you'll be fine. Like, you'll be golden. But then you get to this point where you start learning more. You start watching things on TikTok, on YouTube, and all these things. And then you get to informed complexity, where you start learning these things. You're like sort of informed, but then you start to overcomplicate everything. And you overcomplicate the basics and you go past them. But what's I think really dangerous about this is that while we're in this state, at least while I was in this state, I was like, oh yeah, I'm overcomplicating the basics, but it's like this confident incompetence. Like, I'm confident, I know what I know, but in reality, you don't know nothing. Like, in other words, it's like being super confident when you probably shouldn't be, especially because you're incompetent. But I think that's the stage where it's informed complexity. And then I think going with our example still of like getting in shape, it'd probably be like, oh, you gotta get up at 5 a.m. and then do your cold plunge in the morning. And then after that, you gotta go do your mile run. And then after that, go like doing all these things. And then you gotta hit like every micronutrient and macronutrient, all these things, when you're really just overcomplicating it. And then you get to the point where you start learning more and more and more. And then you're like, oh my goodness, I realize that I've been overcomplicating all of this. And you get to informed simplicity. And you go back to the basics where it's just focus on sleep, focus on diet, focus on exercise, and that's all you really need to do. That's like the 20% that makes 80% of the difference. And so that is what at least I'm calling the complexity curve, when we're overcomplicating a lot of things. And I think it really hit for me because I remember a pivotal moment. I think I talked about this in a past podcast, but where I was overcomplicating this whole entrepreneurship thing, where really I started off as like, okay, the only thing I need to do is make something that people want. Like, that's all entrepreneurship is. But then I got to the point where it was overcomplicating. It's like, oh, well, how do I get ad revenue, and how do I bring more people onto the team, and then lay out my vision, and then get a job board going, and like all these different things that I was trying to do and overcomplicating everything. When in reality, like, now I've gotten to the point where like, bro, just make something that people want. Like, that is the basics. And you don't have to go past that. You don't have to overcomplicate things. Just stick with the basics. I think that's the big lesson of the complexity curve. And not saying that I'm him or anything when it comes to entrepreneurship, because I think for sure it's a simple thing to say, but in practice and execution is actually something that I found very difficult. it's just tough to figure out what exactly to do, especially when those things that you are doing are not generating results. But I think that's something I'll probably get back to when I discuss work things. Anyways, on to the next thing. Okay, this next thing is kind of interesting. I'm calling it definition tautologies. But the way I'm terming this, and this is something that I thought of, but these are statements that appear redundant on the surface, but reveal hidden assumptions about how we define certain terms. And so the big thing is that, first of all, what is a tautology? Tautology in philosophy and logic is just when you say something over again. It's like saying big giant or small shrimp. I don't know, something like that. But it's just basically repeating the same word. Like you're saying something, but it doesn't need to be there. You're repeating the same thing over and over again. And the reason I bring this up is because I talked about this a couple episodes back when I was talking about Socrates and how he defined harm. At least I wrote a paper on this. And basically, here are a couple examples, and then I'll try to go back and explain it more. But Socrates argued, one of his big arguments was that nothing can harm a good person. The reason that this argument holds up is because of how Socrates defines each of these terms. He defines them in such a way that it has to be true. But the reason that it's important is because it makes us take a step back and redefine, okay, well, actually, that's what harm really is. And because really what he means is that no apparent harms can truly harm a good person. And this is what it means by that. No amount of physical pain or hardship will ever harm a person's soul. That's really what he's getting at when he says nothing can harm a good person. But more than that, he's making us take a step back and question what we define as harm. Another example of that would be money can't buy happiness. When people say money can't buy happiness, the reason this works is because of how they define happiness. If they define happiness as true joy, something that money truly can't buy, then of course money can't buy happiness. But the only reason this works is because of how they define happiness. And so the point of all of this is to say that these definition tautologies are helpful in that they allow us, or at least they allow me to take a step back and question how I've been defining things. That's one of them. And then on to the next thing. So there's the other thing I heard on a podcast. I think it was on the, what's his face? Jocko's podcast, the extreme ownership guy. And he was talking with Tulsi Gabbard. Really cool American Samoan woman who apparently is about to be like the head of the FBI or something, but she ran for president a couple elections back. I just found out about her, and I've been listening to a couple of her podcasts, just trying to like get a sense of her, especially because I still don't, I'm not a fan of politics. I don't get involved with like whatever. Maybe I'm a terrible guy for it, but oh well. I'm going to live my life. But they talked about this thing called the Overton Window, and it's a model that explains how political ideas gain or lose public acceptance over time. And it's the idea that something initially is unthinkable, then it becomes radical, then acceptable, then sensible, then popular, then it becomes policy. I think a perfect example of this is Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler might have been like the unthinkable, like, oh, killing a Jew is like absolutely unthinkable. But then eventually it just became policy. And that's what eventually led to the Holocaust. Then it also could be used for good. It's like initially it was kind of unthinkable to think that some people, because of their skin color, are not property. Like in America, whatever, the 1800s, like they literally owned slaves. And it would have been unthinkable to treat a black person or a person of color as if they were literally a human being, because they were treated as property. But eventually it just became policy. It became policy that you have to treat them like people. And I just thought it was a super interesting idea, especially when you apply it to like work cultures and how they develop over time. Because I think you can apply this to really any kind of culture, whether that be work, whether that be like ethnic culture or anything really. Honestly, I think something similar like this will happen. At least that's my prediction that I talked about randomly a couple episodes back, talking about transracialism and how it potentially might be like this thing that initially is kind of unthinkable, but then will eventually become policy. And I could absolutely be totally wrong about that prediction, but that's what predictions are for, to be totally wrong. Okay, moving on. Man, these are two other essays that I just finished up being out here and wrapping up finals in Tonga. But one of them is about what makes a life meaningful. What makes a meaningful life? Like if you look at my life versus your life versus your parents' lives, what makes that life meaningful versus someone else, like a Ariana Grande or something. But what's super interesting, I think, is trying to come up with a list of criteria to determine, okay, if this life is X, Y, and Z, then it is meaningful. Well, at least I think it's tough because it's hard to say whether life is meaningful years after the fact. Because honestly, in the grand scheme of things, like you fast forward everything a couple of years from now, let's say 10, 100, even a million years from now, literally none of our lives will matter. And everything we do will become very insignificant. And of course, as Christians, as a believer, you might have different views on this. But I think even so, like worldly things, earthly things, it really doesn't matter. And so this was super apparent with someone like Van Gogh, who I wrote about in the paper. Super famous artist, at least famous after the fact. During his life, he only ever sold one art piece. One art piece. That is insane. But now he's known as one of the most well-renowned artists in the world. But it was only after the fact. It was only after his death. But surely, if you fast forward another million years from now, no one will have ever heard of Van Gogh. And I think another example is when we were in class sitting one day and a teacher was drawing the Venn diagram. Like, I think everyone knows what a Venn diagram is. It's the two circles, but they're kind of overlapping. And you write on one side one thing, the other side the other thing, and then there's similarities in the middle or where they overlap. But I did not know this. Venn diagram was named after a person, and his name was Venn. But years now, like, I've never heard of that dude or anything he's ever done in his life. And so I guess it might be meaningful in that we have the Venn diagram now, but I have no idea that it was connected to an actual person who named it after himself. So it's hard to say whether that is like a meaningful life or not, but I guess these are just some rantings on what makes a life meaningful. But the last part of this philosophizing section, I realized that it's kind of going a bit overboard and a bit too deep into some certain topics, but that's what the philosophizing section is about, you feel me? Anyways, on to the next thing, and we're back to Aristotle. Aristotle, he talks about 3 types of friendship. This is another one of his big things. He talks about 3 types of friendships, and he defines it. The first is utility. That's like the lowest kind of friendship, where like these are kind of like classroom friends, where you're just friends inside school. And then you got the pleasure friends. These might be friends that you like go hang out with on the weekends or whatever. And then the third type is like the strongest kinds of friendships. Friends where you genuinely care about the other person simply for the sake of the other person. Now, I was thinking about this more, and I think at some level, all friendships and relationships in general, and I still believe this, that they all reduce down to utility. Because at the end of the day, I think it comes down to like how much does this person serve me in some way. And that doesn't mean that I would like throw someone out if they don't serve me, but it doesn't mean that I would probably distance myself if that were the case. My thinking is that utility, at least the way Aristotle defines it, is like the lowest type of friendship. Like even the classroom friend where you just exchange answers with them, like they're still a friend, but they're like the lowest kind of utility. But then higher than that, like a more utility is a pleasure friend, where you hang out with them on the weekends because you have a good time with them, and that's why you hang out. They give you that utility of being someone who can make you laugh and you can have a good time with. And that's the exchange. But this third type of friendship that Aristotle talks about, we're talking about like the completely good friendships. I think it's interesting because with these ones, first of all, they're super rare. So it's hard to see like a super specific example of this. But I think even then, when 2 friends are friends for the other person's sake, I think it truly is more because of their sake. And because each of them are trying to improve each other in morally upstanding ways. Like the example I can think of is like a wife and husband. They meet and they marry each other. And it comes to this point where they genuinely admire the moral character of the other person. And they see that the other person can help them improve themselves. And I think that's why it becomes this morally good and as Aristotle puts it, this completely good friendship. They care about the other person, but I still think they only care about the other person insofar as they can help oneself become a better person or morally improve in some way. Because here's my thinking. Why would it ever make sense for me to stay friends with someone who is literally like tearing me down and is not helping me improve my life in some form or fashion? Like even the friends who are kind of like not helping you towards your goals, they're helping you in other ways. They're helping you by like, I don't know, making you laugh or like being able to have a good time with them. And so that's, I don't know, that's what I'm thinking about, like this whole idea of friendships and even more broadly relationships. Anyways, moving on to L's of the week. Let's see, L's of the week, or at least L's since last episode. I can't think of any off the top of my head. At least I can't think of any huge ones. Of course, I think learning a new language, like there's L's all over the place. I just gotta accept it, dude. Like as I'm learning Tongan, there are so many times throughout the day, so many times where I don't know a word or I say something and it's completely wrong, or I barely learn a new word and I completely forget it literally the next second. So many times where I take those L's, and they're kind of like mini L's, but they're L's nonetheless, though. They're failures nonetheless. And I use that and fail forward. And I think that's very, very powerful. And I'll probably talk about this in a future episode. I think my next episode will probably be when I leave Tongan. And I'll gather all my learnings, and I'll probably do like a whole Tongan section documenting my whole thing. Because honestly, I've been documenting this entire journey. 30 days in Tonga, learning the language, learning the culture, learning the values. Like, it'll be super sick. But regardless, that's probably the biggest L's I've been taking, is like L's of learning a new language and then getting things wrong all the time. Like literally all the time. Moving on to the weekly roundup, different things that I found throughout the week. Let's see. The first thing I found is a quote, and it talks about how belief is a forced option. And I think I was reading this. Where was I reading this from? It was from some religious or philosophy book. Oh no, it was a philosophy of religion book where philosophers of different religions wrote these essays on why they are that specific religion. Like why they're Christian, why they're atheist, why they're agnostic, all these different things. And the one that stood out to me, or the quote from there, was this: to be a theoretical agnostic is to be a practical atheist. Now what does this mean? It basically means that if you theorize that, okay, I'm agnostic, like maybe God exists or God might not exist, that's basically the same thing as if God never existed. And I think this highlights one of the main things that has motivated my position, my standing in this whole religion debate, in this whole God debate. And it's that belief in God is really a forced option. Meaning there's no in between, there's no middle ground, because a middle ground really is choosing one side of the fence. If you stick on the fence, it's in all practical ways living your life as if God doesn't exist. But that's the quote that I found from there. Anyways, on to the question. The question I found, oh man, actually this has a whole story behind it. But the question that really resonated with me was, what was your mama I made it moment? Now this one was really powerful. So I think I actually talked about this a while back. Talking about a friend I had who is doing a podcast, and he's recorded a whole bunch of episodes, but he hasn't released any of them. So he asked me to hop on his podcast. I was like, oh yeah, for sure, I'd be down. But I expected it to be a 30-minute podcast, turned into 2 hours and 30 minutes. But it was a cool, like being able to talk with him. It wasn't just me, it was me, him, and we were co-hosting with another guy. So I was his substitute co-host. In this podcast called Mama I Made It, and at the very end, they asked this question to all the guests. They asked, what was your Mama I Made It moment? And it was really, really cool being able to tell that story, because it's been a while since I've told that story. And I've told it multiple times, but I think being able to tell it again, because I've been workshopping different ways to tell it, it really hit home for me. Let me see if I can remember the quicker version. So I talked about when I was a kid, I was super early epiphany that I really want to make her proud. I really, really want to make her proud. Being a single mother, taking care of all of us. Even though I was initially mad that she took away my iPad, like, I want to make her proud. Then transitioning from that to the story of how crazy it was getting my college acceptance, getting rejected over and over and over again. At the very last minute, having the chance that everything will all slip away, but finally getting accepted into Northwestern. Bam! That was your Mama I Made It moment. Yeah, that was huge for me. And I think telling it on that podcast, low-key, like, I wasn't on the outside tearing up, but on the inside, bro, I was tearing up like crazy. And it was cool to be able to answer that question on the pod. Maybe I'll link it in the show notes whenever it does come out, but I think it won't come out till like next year. Anyways, on to the podcast that I found. This one's more lighthearted. It's just a podcast I found from the Acquired podcast. I think these are 2 VC guys. Not really sure what they are, but they're 2 investors of some type who know a bunch of things, and they do deep dives into different companies. And one of the companies they recently did a deep dive into was Meta, formerly Facebook. They did literally 6 hours going deep into the founding story of it, all the rumors behind it, what actually happened. Like, they go in deep, and I thought it was just a fascinating read, getting to learn more about all that. Yeah, sorry. It might sound like I'm rushing through this, kind of because I am. It took, bro, oh my goodness. The time leading up to finally record this podcast was so long. Just because, like, I was getting chased by dogs and so many animals, and my little cousins were, like, following me around. Anyways, moving on to the final part is the life update. This is the big thing. Starting with the update on my God. I think it's been super helpful being able to change my environment from school, really get away from everything, and experience the life of Tongan. Because Tonga is so unique in that it's like, I said this so many times, but the island life is so slow and it's so laid back and it's so chill that it finally has given me some time where I can take a step back and really evaluate my life, and I think take a second to cherish the things that God has given me. I think that is honestly really been helpful, and being able to read my scriptures and say my prayers and all those things I think is super helpful. But yeah, relationship with God is going well, I think. And so of course that, like I mentioned before, if you put God first, everything else falls into place, and I've definitely seen that firsthand. I think so. But going to the next thing, update on myself. I think the biggest thing, honestly, for myself has been coming out here to Tonga and really pouring time into learning a new skill. And that new skill being learning a new language. And it's been honestly phenomenal, fantastic. It's only day 4 right now. And I feel like I've learned like the same thing in like a first year's college class of learning the language. And I probably actually know more right now. And I'm able to use it more than like 1 year's worth of a Tongan language class, which I think is like very, very cool. And granted, I did know a decent amount, or at least a theory behind Tongan and speaking Tongan a fair amount. But being out here, like in these 4 days, being able to practically use it basically everywhere I go has been super, super helpful. So that's a really cool opportunity. I'm really happy that I'm able to come out here and do it. Update on my people. Yeah, it's super cool. Like, bro, it's so fun being able to hang around my little cousins. Just playing games and studying with my little cousin who's also learning Tongan. She's not even 12 or something. She's like super young, but she's helping me learn Tongan. Actually, it's helping me a ton learn Tongan. Going on to update on my work. I think biggest update on my work, I finished up all my school stuff. So that's very nice. And let's see, what else did I do for work? Oh, man, it's crazy. So literally over the summer, I emailed a whole bunch of different places. I think I sent like 400 cold emails. Now I found out that 400 isn't even a lot. I found out 800 isn't a lot. Like the minimum you want is at least like a couple thousand for these cold emails. That's news to me, but I just found that out about like the sheer amount that you need for cold emails. But anyways, I sent out a whole bunch of cold emails. I only got like a couple of responses. But 2 of these responses in particular, I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to do business with these 2 businesses. I kept emailing them. I would literally pull out the email thread, but I emailed them like 6 times in a row, each following up. Like, yeah, I emailed one day, and then the day after, and then the day after, and the week after, and the month after. And literally all this time has passed since the summer, which I think is like at least 3 months, but they have finally responded back to me, which is super nice that they finally responded back to me. It was like, well, great timing, because now I'm in Tonga and I'm trying to like learn a language right now. But yeah, I'm reaching back out to them. Maybe I'll cook up a website or 2 while I'm out here. Hopefully make some money, sell them on We Are Nesian, and then keep going with things and serve them, like give them value, help them get customers online. Because the fact that they don't have websites, like, bro, come on, bro. Anyways, I think that's it for the most part. I think moving forward, I'm not sure if I want to keep recording podcasts while I'm out here. I'll just do like a mega podcast after I leave Tonga. Next episode will be episode 100, the biggie, and it's cool. It'll line up perfectly with the big Tongan episode. I'll do a whole section that'll be focused on like me speaking Tongan, another one interviewing my little cousins, and another one like all these different things. So there's so many lessons that I've been learning as a sneak peek to all the lessons I've been learning. One thing that I'll foreshadow for next episode is how content these kids are, because they don't have anything. And it's crazy being from America. Even me, like from America, I would cry if I didn't get my tablet. But over here, like, bro, they find ways to make fun and do stuff out of nothing. Like, I saw these 2 kids, they had 2 coins and a little platform. And each kid, they put their coin on and they would shake the platform. Whoever's coin was stayed on the longest would win. It's like, they find little things like that to like be content, and they're able to, I don't know, to just be so grateful with what they have. Because to them, it's not even little. It's just what they have. It's just what is. That's a good circle back to what I originally said with this unwanted sympathy. Like, someone might come and look at these kids like, oh, look at what they're struggling with. Look at all these things that they're missing out on. When in reality, like, they don't want it. Or at least now I'm projecting onto them. But like, if I were them, like, I wouldn't want it. Like, all this sympathy that they're giving me, like, they just don't know how things are and it's just what is. And when you're going at life for the first time and all you have is what you have, and you don't know that what you have is like so little compared to all these rich, spoiled kids in America, then it's just what is. Like, learn to live with it, learn to deal with it. I don't know. I just think that's super, super powerful. But yeah, now I've been yapping at this point. I'll wrap this up, edit it, send it, and see you on the big mega podcast episode, the special 100 podcast episode. It'll be cool. Cannot wait. But till then, tautologies, teo ako lefa gatong ape, teo fenga pito. I was trying to say that they'll just keep trying, learning Tongan for 30 days or so, but I'll see you on the other side. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tautologies.